G'day everyone, thanks for tuning in. My next job on the bus is to finish off this kitchen cabinet. So I actually have a previous video where I showed how I made this kitchen cabinet, and it's just a basic design. Instead of built-in drawers, I just have these plastic storage tubs that sit on shelves that I can pull in and out. And I did that because I didn't want the hassle of having to build and install a whole bunch of drawers. These are much lighter weight than what built-in timber drawers would have been, and also because they're plastic, you know, they're super easy to clean. So when they get too dusty and dirty inside, I can just pull the whole thing out, give it a good clean and put it back in. So I'm really happy with that idea. And the other thing that I did in this cabinet was to install a slide out stove, so that way I have my entire benchtop free for working and food preparation and so on. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can check it out. So to finish off the cabinet, I need to put a couple of doors on the front. So I'm just going to make some basic shaker style timber doors for the front that I'll be able to latch closed, and that will stop all of this stuff from falling out when I'm driving. Okay, so here's my very detailed technical drawings, haha. This is basically the shape and size of the front of my cabinet. So my cabinet is 760 millimeters long, and the height that I want the doors to be on the front is 750 millimeters. And I'm going to have two doors that'll be hinged on the outside. And I want there to be like a tiny gap here on the outside, only like a millimeter or two, so that the doors are inset just a fraction in from the edge of the cabinet. And then in the center here between the two doors, I also want there to be a little bit of a gap. So taking that into account, I've worked out this is the size that I need for each door. So each door is going to be 750 mil by 377 millimeters, and because I'm doing basic shaker style door, this is what the pieces are going to look like. So basically I need two pieces that are 750 long, and then the rails inside that need to be 249 long. Obviously if you're doing, you know, cabinets, you'll have to work it out based on the size of whatever your cabinet is. Your doors will obviously be different, but this will allow me hopefully to have a millimeter or so inset from the edge of the cabinet, and probably about 3 millimeter gap between the two doors in the middle, which will hopefully look all right. Okay, so I've got my four pieces cut here, and basically what I'm going to do is they're going to get joined together like this. I'll put my pocket holes at the end of each of these rails here, and they'll be screwed in there. Now, once I've done that, the next thing I'm going to do is actually with my router groove out a bit along the inside of this frame that I'll then be putting a piece of ply down into. That will make more sense when I come to do it, and I can show you what I'm actually doing. But I just need to be mindful of that because the router is going to cut about 10 mil in from the edge here. So when I put my pocket holes in for the screws, I want to make sure that I'm putting them sort of a bit more towards the outside, because I don't want the screw to get in the way of where the router is going to be going. And you can see what I mean. I actually did a practice one earlier, and on this one I actually, when I did the pocket holes, I centered the pocket holes in this piece of timber, but then you can see when I came to do the routering how close the router came to this pocket hole, and now that screw is just kind of in there. It's pretty close to the edge, and I wasn't really happy with that because that's not going to be very strong. And so that's why now when I come to do the pocket holes for the doors, I'm going to try and move them over this way a little bit so it steers clear of this edge. So you can see I've kind of put the pocket holes more towards one side, which leaves a decent sized gap here for the router to pass by. Okay, so there's my basic frame. So now what I'm going to do is just go around with my router and cut away this inside edge. Because I'm using 9mm thick ply as my inset piece, I've set the depth on my router blade to a fraction over 9mm so that it cuts the right depth for the ply to sit into. So now you can see I've got this notch cut out all the way around the inside. Now I could cut my pieces of ply with rounded corners to fit in there, but it's actually a lot easier for me to just chisel out these corners here to make them square. So I'm going to go around and do all that now, and then I'm going to give it a really good sand, and then I'll be able to put my pieces of ply in. Okay, so now my piece of ply will sit down into the back like that. Now before I glue and nail this into the back, I'm just going to give the frame a really good sand to smooth up these edges, because once the back of the door is in, I won't really be able to get to them properly. So I'll give it all a really good sand now, and then I'll stick the back in. The last thing I'm going to do is just plug these holes up with some little plugs and sand it smooth. You can actually buy these little plugs just from the same places that stock the Kreg pocket hole screws. They come in different types depending on what sort of timber you want. You can actually get pine ones, but because I'm going to be painting these cabinets, it doesn't really matter what you know, that you can see the grain or whatever in these. They're just going to be painted over, and it's actually cheaper just to buy the paint grade ones. So they're the ones that I've bought. Put a bit of glue in there. And you just push them in as far as you can. So they just go in like that, and once the glue's fully dried, I can come back and just sand them smooth so that they're flush with the rest of the cabinet frame. Okay, so you can see that that's kind of filled in the hole and it's nice and smooth now. And once that's painted over, you will hardly even notice those, hopefully. You can see here I mucked up this one a bit, like took a chunk out of it. And that was because I started to chisel it from the other end, so which kind of started to lift it up a little bit, which you don't want. So when you're chiseling to scrape these things down, always like chisel away from the hole. So the hole's going in this way, you want to chisel in the other way so that you're scraping it away from the hole, and that way you'll avoid taking chunks out of it like that. But anyway, first one. Okay, so there's my two cabinet doors. Officially the first set of cabinet doors I've ever made. I'm pretty happy with how they turned out, except I've just noticed that, I didn't realise until now, but I've put the panels with the grain going in different directions. That's a bit of a rookie mistake. I'm probably going to be painting these cabinet doors, so once that's done you won't even hardly be able to see the grain and notice it, so I'm not going to be too stressed about it. It was really bugging me at first, but the more I look at it, the more I actually kind of quite like it, that they're not the same. They're square at least and straight. Now the next job is to put the hinges on so that I can attach them to the cabinet. These are the hinges that I'm going to be using for the doors. They're concealed hinges, which basically means that once they're installed, you can't see them from the front of the cabinet. They're not visible on the outside. And the other reason the main reason actually that I'm going for these is that there's way more tutorials on YouTube about how to install these things, but the best part is that they're actually adjustable. So, you know, if you're installing other kinds of basic hinges, it's really essential that you get them like lined up and perfectly straight and perfectly in position when you drill the holes and screw them in. With these ones, they're actually a little bit forgiving because they've actually got screws built into them that you can use to adjust the position of where the door actually sits when the hinge is installed. So I just figured, you know, this is my first time ever making cabinet doors and installing hinges. It might be good to be able to, you know, have a little bit of adjustment possible in case I don't get things perfectly lined up, which is, you know, a pretty high possibility. So I'm using these ones, and I went for Blum hinges because I think they're considered to be pretty good quality. I just got them from Bunnings. They have a few different ones. The ones I'm using are 107-degree overlay. Overlay just means like this is the edge of the cabinet here, and the door is going to pretty much overlap almost that whole thing. You can get half overlay hinges where the door is kind of inset and only covers like half the edge of the cabinet, and I think you can also get inset ones where the door is actually like inside the cabinet frame. But anyway, the ones I'm going for are the full overlay ones. These ones are just ordinary hinges. I'm not getting soft closing hinges. I'm probably one of the few people that don't actually like soft closing doors. I want to be able to slam my doors if I'm a bit cranky. I find soft closing doors like a bit frustrating sometimes, but anyway, that's just me. I'm a bit weird. So these are just normal hinges. They do seem like pretty good quality, so hopefully they'll be all right. Now, to help me put these hinges in, I'm actually going to be using the Kreg hinge jig because I just found the Kreg pocket hole jig that I've been using for my pocket holes just so good and so easy to use and just makes everything just work so much better. So I figured I'd do the same for the hinges. You don't need to use a jig to install these kinds of hinges. You can just use, like if you've got an ordinary Forstner bit on your drill, you can just measure out, you know, with a pencil and a ruler, work out exactly where this needs to go and drill it. But just having the jig just makes it easier to line everything up, get it straight, get the hole exactly where you want it, and so it's, you know, the perfect depth and all that. So for me, it was worth the money because it just makes things that little bit easier. And the good thing about these Blum hinges is that they fit the Kreg jig, so you can actually use that with these. And it seems to work well. So if you look on the back of the hinge packet, it actually gives you the measurements for where you need to drill the holes to insert the hinge. So these hinges require a 35mm hole, and that's the size of the bit that comes with the Kreg jig, so that's perfect. So that this jig will drill a 35mm hole, which is perfect. And this center of this hole for these hinges needs to be 22.5mm from the edge of the cabinet. Now, with the way this jig works, it doesn't have like a setting for determining the distance from the edge of your cabinet to the center here, which is a bit annoying. But what it does do is these adjustment screws here determine like how far in from the edge of the cabinet the hole is. So if I look at this is the way I figured it out, and I hope it's right. So it needs to be a 35mm diameter hole, which means that the radius of this hole is 17.5mm. So if I take that away from 22.5, you're left with 5mm. So I'm going to assume that that means that the start of the hole here, the edge of the hole, needs to be 5mm in from the edge of my cabinet in order for the center of the hole to be 22.5mm. So what I need to do here then on these little, I'm not sure if you can see this very clearly, but these adjustment screws here have numbers here. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, and that corresponds to the number of millimeters from the edge of your cabinet. So what I need to do is set these to 5. This one, put that in there, just turn it around. Oh, I can't do this with one hand. There we go. So you can hear it, you feel it kind of click in when you know it's in place. So they're set on 5 millimeters, and that means when I put this jig up against the edge of the cabinet, where it drills the hole is the hole's going to be 5 millimeters in from the edge of the cabinet. And then all you need to do is work out how far in from the top and the bottom you want your hinges to be, and then place the jig accordingly. So when I'm working out where I'm going to put these hinges, I also need to be mindful of what other screws and things I've got going into these pieces of timber. In the top here, it's not so bad because, as you can see, there's nothing really, there aren't any screws or anything in this section of the piece of timber where I want to put the hinge. The only screws are the pocket holes that are going from the top of these down in through here. So that'll be well clear of all them, so I don't have to worry about that. But it's a different story down on the bottom here because, as you can see on this side, there's a pocket hole screw going in sort of about that height down through here, and then I've also got 2 pocket hole screws coming from this one in through here. So ideally I would have liked to sit the hinge a little bit lower because obviously it's already a fair height from the bottom of the door, but I think it'll be better to go just to make sure I'm putting the hinge so that the mounting plate, when it gets screwed in, is kind of avoiding these screws that are already inside here. So in here, the 2 screws that are needed to secure the mounting plate on, it actually takes up a fair bit of space. See, if I was to put the hinge down here, the risk is that this bottom screw would be hitting one of the pocket hole screws that I've got already going in there. So really I want that to be up about there at least, so that none of those screws are interfering with the pocket hole screws inside. So that's about where the hinge is going to have to sit, I think. So I've just marked a line that's 190 mil in from the bottom of the door, and so that's got to be roughly where the middle of the hole for the hinge goes. So I know now when I come to put the jig on that I need to line up the hole. The jig's actually got a couple little notches marking the center of the hole there, so I just need to clamp it on so that those notches line up with my mark, and I'll know that the hole is kind of roughly in the right position. And I did a practice one on my old practice frame here, so you can see this is the hole that the drill's going to drill. So that's my 35 millimeter hole. It's 5 mil in from the edge, which means that the center of the hole is 22.5 mil in from the edge, which is where the hinge packet says it needs to be. And the jig also allows you to drill the little pilot holes for the screws, which is good. So I'm going to go ahead now and do it on the real thing, and hopefully I don't muck it up. Okay, so I've got the jig positioned so that those notches are lined up with my mark for the center of the hole. I'm just going to clamp it onto the door so that it doesn't move out of that position. Okay, so that's not going to move, hopefully. And then I need to insert this bit into the drill. So I need first of all to put it through that. What this does, it's actually a guide. It locks down into the jig so that the bit is nicely centered and it can't move around as you're drilling. And the end of that just goes into your drill. Into there. Okay, so now all you do is put that down in there, lock it into place. And now when I drill this hole, Once the end of the drill gets down onto the top of the jig, I'll know that that hole is the right depth for my hinge. And hopefully you can see there's my hole drilled out for the inset hinge. So before I take this off, I'm just going to drill 2 little pilot holes for the screws that will secure the hinge in place. Okay, so the next thing I have to do is attach these mounting plates onto the cabinet there. And again, it tells you on the back of the hinge packet, where are we? You can see this, that the mounting plate needs to be 37 millimeters in from the edge of the cabinet is where the screws need to go. So, where's my pencil? So I've already marked here for the top hinge. I've measured 37 mil in from the edge. So I know that my screws for the mounting plate need to be on this line. So now this is the tricky part. I want this door to sit about there, I think. So just going to mark the middle of these holes. I've now got my marks for where I need to drill the pilot holes for these screws. And in order to do that, I'm just going to get these shelves out of the way, so I've got plenty of room to maneuver the drill in there. I'll just help a little bit. I don't have a jig for this bit, so I'm just going to have to try and drill it as straight as I can. We'll see how we go. It's going to be a bit awkward, but we'll see how we go. I'm just going to start off with the impact driver, but I'll finish it with the hand screwdriver because I don't want to bugger the thread on these screws or put them in with too much force. But I'll at least get them in with this first, and then I can adjust it with the hand screwdriver. At the moment they look like they're hanging. Actually, I'm pretty happy with where that's hanging at the moment. Okay, well, so far so good. The door is on. I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the other door now and install that, and then when they're both on, I'll be able to adjust them using the adjustable screws in the hinges to get them to sit nicely. So far, that's actually not too bad for my first go at putting door hinges on. Sweet. Well, there you go. Doors on the cabinet. I'm pretty happy with that. So now obviously I need to put some handles on. So these are the handles that I'm going to use. I just got them from Bunnings, and they come with these screws which I don't know if you can see on the camera, but they've just got a single groove. So they're for a flathead screwdriver, which is pretty useless, to be honest. The single groove is a pretty crappy way to drive a screw. It's easy for the screwdriver to slip in and out, and they're just really shitty screws. So I'm actually not going to use them at all. And I've went and got these instead. I just bought these from Bunnings. Timber screws. They're countersunk ones. They're black, so they'll match the handles, and they've got Phillips head heads on them, so they'll be much easier to put in and take out if I need to as well. At some stage I'll be painting these cabinets, so I'll have to take the handles off again when I do that. The middle like that, or should I do them more to the I think in the middle. I'm going to mark where the middle is first. So I apologise for the terrible camera angle here. I didn't realise until after I'd shot it that I was actually blocking the camera for most of this. But basically what I did was I used the handles to mark the position of where the holes had to be. And I think it's a good idea to do this one at a time, because as I found out later, the handles, even though I bought all the same handles, they're actually slight variations in the size and they're not all the same. So I would recommend doing each handle separately so the holes are marked exactly where they need to be for that particular handle. And once I had the holes marked, I drilled small pilot holes just to help the screws go in a bit easier, and then I screwed them in. Well, there you go, cabinet doors. I'm pretty pleased about them, actually. I've never made cabinet doors before, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. Yeah. So now I'm not going to paint them just yet. I'm still actually deciding whether I'm going to paint these cabinets or stain them. And I'm going to do that at a later stage after I've built everything else. For now, I'm just trying to get things finished to the stage that I need to be able to qualify as a motorhome. So this will do for now, and later on, after I've built the rest of my cabinets and finally made a decision about what colours I'm going to use, then I'll come back and paint these. But yeah, pretty stoked with that, actually. It's looking good.